My name is Deborah Johnson, and I'm 50 years old. I've seen a lot in my life, more than anyone should if I'm being honest. But the truth is, I've never really complained. Maybe it's just the way I was raised, or maybe it's because I've always believed that my children, Jamarcus and Tyesha, deserved a better life than I had. So that's what I worked for every day. For them. I don't know if you ever stop being a mother, especially when you lose someone. When Gerald passed away, God rest his soul, I still can't believe it, everything changed. One minute we were a family, trying to make it like everybody else, and the next minute I was a widow, trying to figure out how to keep my family together, how to make the dollars stretch, how to put food on the table when there was barely enough to get by. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you how it started. I'm sure you've never heard of Maplewood, Baltimore. It's a small neighborhood, tucked between a strip mall and an old railway track that doesn't see a lot of traffic anymore. People pass through it without noticing, and that's fine with me. We don't need to be noticed. We just need to be left alone to live our lives, to survive. I've been a teacher for 25 years, teaching English at St. Mary's High School. Not the most glamorous job, but it's steady. And the kids, oh, they can be tough, but they are my passion. I teach them about Shakespeare and Langston Hughes, about their voices and their stories, and I try my best to help them see that there's more out there for them than what they've been told. But after Gerald died, it all felt different, like the color had drained out of the world. Gerald was a good man. He worked construction for as long as I can remember, building up this city one brick at a time. He was tough, but gentle. He'd come home every night, dirty and exhausted, but he'd always kiss me on the cheek and tell me he loved me like it was the most natural thing in the world. He was a man who worked hard for his family, who didn't ask for much. And when he died in that construction accident, I felt like the ground beneath me had just disappeared. It was just me now, and the kids. Jamarcus was 16, a good kid, but full of teenage angst. He spent more time in his room than he did with me, and we clashed constantly about everything. The worst part? He had this chip on his shoulder. A lot of it was because his father had passed, and I don't blame him for it. We were struggling, and Jamarcus didn't understand why. Why we couldn't just buy the things he wanted, why his dreams of playing basketball at a big school felt so far away. And the harder I worked to provide for him, the angrier he got. Then there was Tyesha, my bright-eyed girl. She was 17, ready to leave for college in the fall, and she was the one who kept me going. She was determined to make something of herself, determined to make sure we didn't stay stuck in the same rut. But there was pressure on her, too. She wanted to do everything for me, to make me proud, and I could see it in her face. I could hear it in her voice when she talked about her scholarship applications, the late nights she stayed up studying, knowing I was counting on her to get out, to find a way to escape the life we were living. I was proud of both of them, but deep down, I was terrified. They were both carrying so much weight, so much more than I could carry for them. I was proud of my job, too, don't get me wrong, but teaching doesn't pay the bills when the bills are piling up. The rent was due, the car payment was overdue, and I hadn't been able to buy new clothes for the kids in months. I started picking up extra shifts at the diner on weekends. It wasn't much, but it was something. Every extra dollar felt like a small victory, even if it only lasted a few hours. One thing I had was pride. I wasn't going to ask for help. I wasn't going to tell anyone how bad it was, how much I was struggling to keep it all together. I kept telling myself, it's just a season. We'll get through it. But the reality was, things weren't getting easier. They were getting harder. I don't know if you've ever had to live paycheck to paycheck, but it's a kind of quiet despair. You can't plan for anything. You can't hope for anything. You just keep pushing through the days, hoping you'll get to the next one. That was my life, day in, day out. But there was no way I could let my kids see that. They needed to think I had it all figured out. They needed to believe in the dream that there was something better for them. And I loved them so much, you know? I'd give up anything for them. I didn't care what it took. They were my world. But sometimes I felt like I was just holding on by a thread. It was late one night, around midnight, when I found myself sitting at the kitchen table, staring at the bills. They were scattered in front of me: electricity, water, the phone bill, and I was trying to figure out how I could pay them all. I had a few extra hours at the diner that week, but it wasn't enough. It was never enough. Jamarcus came downstairs, looking more like his father than I ever realized. Tall, broad-shouldered, with his father's stubbornness and his own hurt all wrapped up in one. He stood in the doorway, silent for a moment, just watching me. "Mom," he said, his voice soft, "are you okay?" I wanted to tell him everything. I wanted to tell him how scared I was, how tired I was, but I couldn't. I couldn't break down in front of him, so I smiled, even though I could feel the weight of the world pressing down on me. "I'm fine, baby," I said, and I knew he didn't believe me. He stepped forward, looking at the bills on the table. He didn't say anything else. He didn't need to. We both knew the truth. I wanted so much more for him, for both of them. They deserved so much more than this life. But sometimes, life doesn't give you what you deserve. It gives you what you have the strength to handle. And I, Deborah Johnson, was going to handle it, for them. But I had no idea at that moment that something was about to change. Something bigger than any of us could have imagined. Something that would force me to face not just my fears, but my own heart. Because that's how life works. One minute, you're just trying to survive, and the next, everything changes. The first thing I think of when I wake up each morning is the smell of coffee. Gerald used to be the one who'd make it before the kids were old enough to get out of bed on their own. Now, I get up early, too early for anyone but me to be awake, and brew a pot. The house is silent then. Just the drip of the coffee machine, the soft hum of the refrigerator. The mornings are the only time of day that feels calm. I let it sit for a minute before pouring myself a cup, and I hold the warm mug in my hands, letting the steam rise up, even though I don't have the luxury of just sitting and drinking. There's no time for that. There's always something to do: laundry, dishes, bills, errands, but the coffee helps, just a little. I sip it slowly as I look out the kitchen window. The sun's starting to rise, casting a pale light across the backyard. It's a quiet view, but the silence in the house feels more like a heavy weight than peace. In the early hours, before the kids wake up, before the world starts moving, it feels like I'm the only one who carries the weight of everything. I take a deep breath and set the mug down. Time to start the day. I hear Jamarcus stir upstairs, and I know Tyesha won't be far behind. By the time they are both downstairs, I'll already be in full motion, making breakfast, checking homework, getting them ready for school. It's like a dance we've all learned to do over the years. I've been doing it for so long now, it's almost second nature. But that doesn't mean it's easy. Jamarcus comes down first, looking tired, his shirt wrinkled from sleeping on it wrong. He doesn't say much when he comes into the kitchen. He never does in the mornings. He's a quiet one, at least before the world wakes up. But there's a tension about him now that wasn't there before. Maybe it's his age, maybe it's the loss of his father, but I see it in his eyes, the confusion, the anger, the growing frustration, and I try not to think about it too much because I can't fix it all at once. "Morning, Mom," he mumbles, grabbing a piece of toast and shoving it into his mouth. "Morning, Jamarcus, how was last night? Did you finish your homework?" He rolls his eyes. "I didn't have homework." "Really? Nothing?" "Not in math," he grumbles. "We just did that test." I sigh. "Well, make sure you're caught up, you know the rules." Jamarcus nods, but his mind's already somewhere else. Probably on his friends or the latest game he's playing. I can see it in the way he chews his food without really tasting it. Tyesha comes down next, her hair pulled into a neat bun, her face bright but tired. She's been up early every morning, studying for her exams, staying up late trying to get ahead in school, working at the coffee shop whenever she can. Tyesha is determined, always has been. She knows what she wants, and she's willing to do whatever it takes to get there. I watch her for a moment as she moves around the kitchen, setting her things down with precision. She's always been so responsible, so level-headed, but I know that pressure she carries, the weight she puts on herself to make sure everything's perfect. She's 17, and already I can see the adult she's becoming. Too fast, I think. I just want her to be a kid for a little while longer. "Good morning, Mom," she says, her voice soft, yet filled with determination. "Can I borrow the car tonight? I'm working a late shift." "Of course," I say without thinking, it's automatic. "But remember, you need to be careful driving at night, okay? It's late and I don't want you out there alone too long." She smiles, her eyes lighting up with appreciation. "I will, Mom, I promise." I can tell she's stressed, but she hides it well. She always does. But it's there, under the surface, the worry that comes with trying to make a future for herself while balancing everything else. The pressure of being the perfect student, the perfect daughter, the perfect person. "I know it's tough, Taisha," I say, my voice softening. "But don't forget, you're doing great. I'm proud of you." "I know, Mom," she says, her voice wavering just slightly. "I just want to make sure I don't let you down." "You won't," I assure her, but even as I say it, I wonder. I've been wondering a lot lately if I've let them down. I can feel the weight of the bills piling up, the overdue notices in the mail, the constant struggle to make ends meet. I've been working 2 jobs, pushing myself to exhaustion, but it never seems like it's enough. I think about the car payment, the rent, the grocery bills, and I just feel overwhelmed. The worst part, I try to hide it from the kids. I don't want them to see me break. I want them to think that we're okay, that everything will work out. They're counting on me to be strong, but it's getting harder to keep up the act. I hear the sound of Jamarcus' sneakers squeaking against the floor as he heads out the door, and Taisha follows shortly after, grabbing her bag and heading for the door. They both leave for school, leaving me alone in the kitchen with my thoughts. I should be getting ready for work, but I sit for a moment, staring at the empty chairs, at the quiet house. I wonder if I've done enough, if I've given them everything they need. I wonder if they'll be okay when I'm not around. But I know I have no choice. I have to keep going. I have to keep pushing. The kids need me, and I'll do whatever it takes to make sure they have a chance. I've been a teacher for 25 years, and I've seen a lot of kids come through my classroom. Some of them come from homes like mine, and some come from homes where everything is handed to them. It's the same everywhere, but it's different in the way it makes you feel. Watching kids who have everything, watching them complain because they don't have the newest phone or the latest shoes, makes me want to shake them and say, "You don't know how lucky you are." But then I see Taisha and Jamarcus. I see their eyes, their ambition, their hunger for something more than this life. I see their drive, and I know that no matter what, I have to help them get there. I have to, because if I don't, who will? I keep telling myself that as I drive to school, as I head to my second job at the diner that evening, working long hours just to make ends meet. It's not glamorous, but it's something, and right now, it's all we've got. I feel the weight of everything on my shoulders, but I carry it anyway, for them, always for them. The evening shift at the diner is always the hardest. By the time I finish my classes, the last bell rings and the kids are safely at home. I'm already running on fumes. I change into my uniform, a faded blue apron that's seen better days, and head into the small, dimly lit restaurant. It's the same routine. Take orders, bring coffee refills, clean the sticky booths, and smile. Always smile. It's part of the job. But tonight, something feels different. Maybe it's because the bills are stacking up higher than usual, or because I can feel Jamarcus growing further away with each passing day. He's been spending more time with his friends than with me, slipping further into himself, the same way I used to when I was his age. I can see the anger in his eyes, and no matter how hard I try, I can't seem to break through. I wonder if he blames me for everything. If he feels abandoned by the father, he never had the chance to know. I try to focus on the customers tonight, but my mind keeps drifting back to the same thoughts, the same worries. The smell of frying oil and sizzling bacon fills the air, mixing with the stale coffee smell that never seems to leave. I carry a pot of coffee to an elderly couple in the corner booth. They're regulars, the kind of people who come in every evening at the same time, order the same thing, and never say much. Just a polite nod when they are done. "Evening, Mrs. Johnson," the man says, his voice low and gravelly. "Evening, Mr. and Mrs. Hayes, how's the soup tonight?" I ask, trying to be cheerful, though I'm not really in the mood for small talk. "Good as always, Mrs." Hayes replies, her smile soft but tired. I wonder if she feels as worn out as I do. I serve them their coffee and move on, my thoughts still swirling. But then I hear a voice behind me and it catches me off guard. "Excuse me, are you Deborah Johnson?" I turn, startled. Standing at the door is a man I don't recognize. He's tall, wearing a dark suit, his face unreadable. There's an air about him that's different from the usual crowd. His shoes are polished, his watch glints in the low light of the diner. "Yes," I answer cautiously. "Can I help you?" He smiles slightly, but there's something in his eyes, a familiarity that's hard to place. "I hope I'm not interrupting. I'm William Carter. I run a real estate development company here in Baltimore. I've heard a lot about you from a friend of mine." "It's a friend? I wonder who." My heart beats faster. What does a man like this want with me? I'm not sure I understand," I stammer, unsure how to react. He chuckles softly. "It's okay. It's just that I've been following your situation. I know you've been working hard, raising your kids on your own after your husband passed." He says it gently, as if he's aware of the pain the words bring. I don't know what to say. This is all too strange. A man I've never met is talking about my personal life like it's public knowledge. The only people who know about my struggles are those I trust. Friends from work, neighbors, maybe even the local grocery clerk who sees me count the pennies every week. But a stranger. "Look, I know this might seem odd," he continues, his voice kind, but there's something persuasive in it. "I want to help. I've heard about your daughter, Tyesha. She's the one going to college soon, right? And Jamarcus, I know he's been struggling in school. I think I can do something to make things easier for you." My mind races. "What do you mean? I'm not sure I understand." William steps closer, lowering his voice a little. "I've been in a position to help a lot of people who have needed a break, and I think I can help you too. I'm willing to cover some of the expenses for Tyesha's college tuition. And I can help Jamarcus too. I know a few people who can get him into a mentorship program, give him a real shot at something more than just this life." I stand frozen, the words sinking in. I don't know what to think. My instinct is to reject the offer, to walk away, to keep my pride intact. But something in his tone, something about the way he's looking at me, makes me pause. It's too much, too fast. "You're serious?" I ask, barely above a whisper. "I am," he says, his voice steady. "I want to help, Deborah, no strings attached. Just a chance for you and your family to have a little peace, to not have to struggle anymore." I shake my head, trying to process it all. "Why? Why would you do this for us?" He meets my eyes, and for a second I see something real in him, compassion, maybe, or just a sense of wanting to right some wrong. "I've been in your shoes in a way," he says. "I know what it's like to work hard every day and never feel like it's enough. My family was poor once. I grew up in a small town, much like where you live now. I just want to help, Deborah. I think you deserve a break." I want to refuse. I want to tell him I don't need his charity, that I'm doing just fine, even though I'm not. But when I look into his eyes, I see something different. I see someone who actually understands what it's like to fight for everything and still feel like you're losing. "I don't know," I say, my voice shaky. "I'm not used to this. Asking for help, it's hard." "You don't have to ask for help," he says, his voice soft but firm. I'm offering it, and if you don't want it, that's fine, but I think it could change things for you. I looked down at the floor for a moment, my mind spinning. Could this be real? Could I actually accept help from someone I barely know? I've spent so many years telling myself that I had to do it all on my own. That accepting help was a sign of weakness. But right now, standing in the quiet diner, I realize I've been wrong. I look back up at William. How do we start? He smiles. I'll take care of everything. All you need to do is say yes. The rest of the evening is a blur. I finish my shift in a daze, my thoughts racing. As I drive home, my hands tighten on the steering wheel. I can't stop thinking about what William said. The possibilities. The chance for Tyesha to go to college without worrying about tuition. The chance for Jamarcus to have some direction, to have a future. But there's a part of me that's still uncertain. A part of me that wonders if this is too good to be true. Why me? Why now? I pull into the driveway, the same old house that's become both my sanctuary and my prison. The kids are asleep, and for a moment I just sit in the car, staring at the house, trying to wrap my mind around everything. For the first time in a long while, I feel a glimmer of hope. It's small, fragile, but it's there. Maybe, just maybe, things could get better, but I'm not sure if I'm ready to let go of the fear that's always held me back. One thing I know for sure, life has a way of surprising you when you least expect it, and tonight I was surprised. The next few days felt like a strange dream. I kept waiting for the other shoe to drop, for the moment when I would wake up and realize that this was all some kind of mistake. That the man in the suit, William Carter, didn't really mean what he'd said, that there was a hidden agenda behind his generous offer. But every time I saw him, every email I received confirming his promise, the feeling only grew stronger. The weight of his kindness settled onto my shoulders, and it felt heavier than I expected. The thing is, I didn't know how to accept it, not fully. I've spent my entire life carrying everything on my back. I've raised 2 kids on my own, made sure they had what they needed, even when I had to go without. I've worked double shifts, scrimped and saved, sacrificed my own happiness for theirs. And now, here was this man, a stranger, offering me the kind of help I couldn't even imagine asking for. It felt like something I wasn't allowed to have, something I didn't deserve. I couldn't stop thinking about it. The fact that Tyesha could actually attend college without worrying about tuition, that Jamarcus might finally get the mentorship and guidance he needed, those dreams I'd tucked away in my heart for so long suddenly felt like they could be real. But I still wasn't sure how to handle the reality of it. "Mom, what's going on with you?" Jamarcus asked one night after dinner, breaking my thoughts. He was sitting across from me at the kitchen table, his arms folded, his face unreadable. "What do you mean?" I asked, looking up from the pile of paperwork I'd been sorting. The bills were still there, always there, but now the weight of them seemed somehow more manageable with the promise of something else, something better. "You're different," he said, his voice sharp. "You've been acting all weird since that guy came around. William Carter, right? What's his deal?" I froze. I hadn't expected Jamarcus to notice. I thought I'd been good at hiding my worries, at least when it came to the kids. But Jamarcus saw everything. He always did, even when I wished he didn't. "I don't know what you mean," I said, trying to sound casual, but even I could hear the hesitation in my voice. Jamarcus stared at me for a moment, his eyes narrowing. "You've been looking at your phone a lot, and you keep talking about how things are going to get better. But you never said what he really wants. What's he getting out of it? No one does something for free, Mom." I sighed, running a hand through my hair. I should have known he'd be suspicious. He'd been through too much already, watched me scrape by for years, and now here I was talking about help from some stranger. It didn't make sense to him, and honestly, it didn't make sense to me either. "Jamarcus, I paused, trying to find the right words. I didn't want to get into everything just yet, didn't want to drag him further into the uncertainty I was feeling. "He's just trying to help us. He's offering some support for Tyesha's college for you. I'm not sure about all the details yet, but it's not a scam. He's genuine." "But why?" Jamarcus pressed. "Why would a guy like him care about us?" I looked at him, really looked at him, and in that moment, I saw how much he was hurting. How much he wanted to believe there was good in the world but didn't know how to reconcile that with the reality of the life we had. "I don't know, Jamarcus," I said, my voice softening. "I don't know, but sometimes people just want to do good. Sometimes it's not about what they can get in return. Maybe he just wants to help because he can." He didn't say anything for a long time. Just stared at his hands, his fingers tapping the table rhythmically. I knew he was thinking about all the things he couldn't say, all the anger and frustration that had been building up inside him for months, maybe years. "You've been working so hard, Mom," he muttered finally, his voice quieter now. "I get it, I do, but this just doesn't sit right. I don't want you to end up getting hurt." "I know," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "I don't want that either." We sat in silence for a while, neither of us knowing what to say next. The tension in the room felt heavy, but I didn't know how to fix it. How to make him see that I wasn't doing this to hurt him, that I wasn't making some kind of reckless decision. I just wanted to give him and Tyesha a chance, an actual shot at a future, at something better than the hand we'd been dealt. The next morning, I woke up to an email from William. It was short, professional. He'd arranged for Tyesha's scholarship application to be expedited and had already connected Jamarcus with someone from a local mentorship program. The words were straightforward, no fluff, no hidden agendas. It felt real, but it still felt too much. I printed out the email and sat at the kitchen table again, holding the paper in my hands. The weight of the offer, the generosity of it, started to sink in, and I found myself struggling with the enormity of it. Could I really accept this? Could I really let go of my pride and allow someone else to take the weight off my shoulders, even if just for a little while? There was a knock at the door, pulling me from my thoughts. I wasn't expecting anyone, and for a moment, I wondered if it was some kind of bad omen, a sign that the universe was going to pull the rug out from under me. I opened the door slowly, and standing there with a warm smile on his face was William Carter. "I hope I'm not interrupting," he said, his tone casual but kind. "I just wanted to stop by and see how you're doing. We're still on track for everything we talked about, but I wanted to make sure you're comfortable with everything before we move forward." I blinked, surprised at his visit. I hadn't expected him to come by in person, especially after everything he had already done. But here he was, standing at my doorstep like he genuinely cared. I appreciate everything you're doing," I said, unsure of what else to say. "But it's a lot. I'm not sure I'm ready to." He raised his hand, cutting me off gently. "I get it. This is a big change, I know. But I want you to know, Deborah, that this is something I'm doing because I believe in what you're doing for your kids. I've seen so many people struggle like you, and I've always believed that sometimes just one person helping can change everything. This is about giving your kids the future they deserve. You've worked so hard for them." I swallowed, the lump in my throat growing. I didn't know what to say. The words were stuck, so instead I just nodded. It wasn't easy to say yes. It wasn't easy to trust, to believe that this man, this stranger, wasn't just another person with their own motives. But something in his eyes and his tone told me that maybe, just maybe, this wasn't too good to be true. "I'll do it," I said quietly. "I'll let you help." William's smile was soft, genuine. "You've made the right choice, Deborah. You and your family deserve this." I closed the door after him, leaning against it for a moment, trying to process the weight of what I'd just agreed to. I didn't know what would happen next, or how things would turn out. But for the first time in a long while, I felt the tiniest bit of hope flicker in my chest. Maybe, just maybe, things were starting to change. The weeks that followed felt like a whirlwind. I don't think I truly understood the weight of what I had agreed to until I started seeing the changes unfold before me. William had kept his word. Everything he promised was coming true. Tyesha's scholarship application was fast-tracked, and she got an acceptance letter from the college she had dreamed of attending for years. Jamarcus, despite his resistance, found himself paired with a mentor who was an old family friend of William's, someone who had turned his life around in ways that Jamarcus couldn't ignore. But just because things were falling into place didn't mean it was easy. Tyesha was ecstatic about the scholarship, but I could see the pressure mounting on her shoulders. She'd been working so hard to earn that opportunity, and now that it was in her hands, it felt even heavier. There were days when she smiled, her eyes full of excitement about the future, but there were other days when I saw the doubt creeping in. "Mom, I don't know how to feel about this," she said one evening after dinner, her hands fidgeting with her phone. "I'm supposed to be happy, but it's like, I'm not sure I can handle all this responsibility. I've never had anything handed to me like this before." She sat across from me at the kitchen table, her voice tight. I looked at her, feeling the weight of her uncertainty. She had spent so much of her life trying to get to this point, trying to prove to herself that she was worthy, that she could make it out of here, out of this life we'd been living. "I understand, sweetie," I said, my voice softer than I felt. "You've worked so hard for this. You're going to do great things, I know it. But remember, you don't have to have it all figured out right now. You don't have to be perfect. Just take it one step at a time, okay?" She nodded but didn't look convinced. I could tell that the pressure of the future was weighing on her more than the excitement. The reality of leaving this life behind, of stepping into a world that felt so unfamiliar, was more than she had bargained for. Then there was Jamarcus. He had started meeting with his mentor, a man named Gregory who had once been in and out of trouble before turning his life around. I didn't know exactly what they talked about, but I could see a shift in Jamarcus, even if he wasn't ready to admit it. The anger was still there, deep, simmering, but there were moments when I saw a glimpse of the boy I used to know, the boy who wanted something more for himself. But it wasn't easy for him either. He spent more time with Gregory than he had with me, and though I knew it was a good thing, a part of me couldn't help but feel a pang of sadness. My son was slipping further away, and it wasn't just the mentors or the scholarship offers. It was life, the distance between him and me, between what I wanted for him and what he wanted for himself. The real turning point came when Jamarcus came home one afternoon, his face tight with frustration. He slammed the door behind him and dropped his backpack on the floor with a heavy sigh. "Jamarcus?" I called from the kitchen. He didn't answer right away, but I could hear him pacing in the living room. When he finally came into the kitchen, his face was a storm of confusion and anger. "I can't do this," he said, his voice low but forceful. "I don't know what's wrong with me, Mom. I just can't. Every time I try to get ahead, it feels like I'm being pulled back." I didn't have the answers he was looking for. I just looked at him, trying to understand what he was going through. "I'm trying to change," he continued, his voice cracking. "But it's like I don't know who I am anymore. I don't know if I'm doing this for me or for you. And I don't even know what I want anymore. I just want to make things right, but I keep messing it up." I reached out and placed my hand on his, feeling the warmth of his skin, but also the tension in his body. "You don't have to figure it all out right now," I said softly. "You don't have to have everything in place. Change takes time, it's messy. But you're on the right path, Jamarcus. You're doing the work, and you don't have to do it alone." He pulled away slightly, shaking his head. "But I don't know if I can keep doing it, Mom. What if I'm just not cut out for it?" I stood up and walked around the table to stand next to him. "What if you're exactly where you're supposed to be?" I said, my voice firm. "What if you're doing everything you need to do to get where you're going, but you can't see it yet? You're not alone in this, baby. I'm here, and so is your mentor. You're going to be okay." He stared at me for a long time before finally nodding, though I could see the uncertainty still swirling in his eyes. "I'm scared, Mom," he said quietly. I'm scared I'm going to mess it all up, and if I do, what happens then? I could feel the weight of his fear pressing down on me, and I knew deep down that all I could do was support him as best as I could. I couldn't protect him from everything, but I could be there when he needed me. I know, I said gently, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead. I'm scared, too, but we don't have to have it all figured out. We just have to keep moving forward, step by step. The days after that were filled with quiet moments of reflection, moments where I caught glimpses of who my children were becoming and who they had yet to be. Tyesha worked hard to prepare for her first year of college, and Jamarcus continued with his mentorship. But the weight of their futures, of everything they were striving for, still weighed heavily on me. And then there was William. I hadn't seen him since that day at the diner, when he'd come by to confirm everything was on track. He'd emailed me a few times, making sure I had everything I needed, but I hadn't spoken to him directly. There was something in the way he'd looked at me that night, something that made me feel like I owed him more than just gratitude. There was a part of me that wondered if I had started to depend on him, on his help, too much. But when he called me again, it felt like the right thing to do. I picked up the phone, and his voice was calm, reassuring. "Deborah," he said, "I just wanted to check in on you. How are you feeling about everything?" I hesitated for a moment before answering, trying to gather my thoughts. I'm doing okay," I said slowly. "But I need to ask you something." "What is it?" he asked, his voice gentle. "Why are you doing this, helping us? I just need to understand. Because honestly, I don't know how to repay you." There was a pause on the other end, and I could almost hear the smile in his voice when he spoke again. "Deborah, you don't need to repay me. This isn't about me. It's about giving your kids the chance they deserve. You've worked so hard, and I just want to make sure they have a future. No one should have to struggle the way you have. That's why I'm doing this. You've done enough. Now, it's my turn to help." I didn't know what to say to that, so I stayed quiet for a moment. The words lodged in my throat, but the more I thought about it, the more I realized something. Maybe, just maybe, I could accept this help. Not because I was weak, but because I knew that in order to help my kids, I had to allow myself to be helped too. "Thank you," I said finally, "for everything." "You're welcome," he replied, and I could hear the sincerity in his voice. "You deserve it, Deborah, more than you know." And for the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of peace. The days that followed William's call were a blur. With Tyesha's college preparations in full swing and Jamarcus continuing his mentorship program, the rhythm of our days became more structured, yet I couldn't shake the feeling that something was changing. The weight of what had been offered to us, and the weight of what I had accepted, hung in the air like a storm cloud. The problem with change is that, no matter how much we hope for it, we're never really ready for it. I wasn't ready for the world to shift beneath my feet. I wasn't ready for the lightness that came with having help, with having people who genuinely wanted to invest in my children's future. I wasn't ready to admit that, perhaps, I didn't have to carry the whole world on my shoulders anymore. But it was happening, slowly, and with each passing day, it felt both like a relief and a threat. I couldn't ignore the fear that lingered. What if I let my guard down too much? What if this help, this kindness, was just a temporary fix? Would I let it cloud my judgment? Would I let someone else, a stranger, get too close? It was Tuesday when I felt that shift the hardest. Tyesha had just come home from an orientation session at her soon-to-be college. She was excited, but there was a level of exhaustion in her that hadn't been there before. Her smile didn't quite reach her eyes, and her usual energy felt drained. "Mom," she said, sitting down at the kitchen table and rubbing her temples, "I don't know if I'm cut out for this." I froze, standing at the counter where I had been preparing dinner. Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. I turned slowly, watching her, trying to read her face. "Sweetheart, what do you mean? You've been working so hard for this. You've got this, I know you do." But even as I said it, I knew something was wrong. Tyesha wasn't the kind of person who backed down from a challenge. She had fought so hard to get here, so what was this doubt? I don't know, Mom. It's not like what I thought it would be, she said, her voice a mix of frustration and uncertainty. Everyone is so sure of themselves, and I just feel like I don't belong there. It's like they're all ready to move on with their lives, and I'm just stuck. I could hear the ache in her voice. The fear of failure. The same fear I'd seen in Jamarcus, only it was different in Tyesha. Hers was quiet, internalized, like she was fighting against herself. The weight of being the first in our family to go to college, the pressure of expectations, was beginning to crush her. I walked over and sat beside her, taking her hand in mine. I know it's hard, baby, I said softly. But you've got something they don't. You have heart, you have strength. You've already proven that by getting this far. She looked at me, her eyes glassy with unshed tears. What if I'm not strong enough, Mom? What if I mess this up? I held her hand tighter. You won't mess it up. You're allowed to feel uncertain. You're allowed to be scared. But you can't give up, not now. This is just a moment, Tyesha, a tough moment, but just a moment. You've already overcome so much to get here. That's something no one can take from you. Tyesha leaned into me, resting her head on my shoulder. I don't know how to stop feeling like I'm not enough, she whispered. You don't have to stop, I replied, my voice gentle but firm. But you do have to keep going. Just one step at a time. You've already proven you belong. You're going to keep proving it every single day. She didn't answer, but the silence between us felt different now, a little lighter, a little less full of doubt. The next morning, I felt the shift, too, the one that had been creeping in since William made his offer. It was the sense that things were no longer entirely within my control, that my children's futures were no longer entirely in my hands, and I wasn't sure if I was ready to share that control with anyone. I had been up early, as I always was, but today, I found myself sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee, staring at the bills that still needed to be paid. Even though William had made it clear that he would handle Tyesha's tuition and Jamarcus's mentorship, the daily grind, the constant pressure of survival never stopped. The rent was due, utilities were mounting, and I hadn't been able to buy groceries for the week. I still had to do this, still had to manage the little things that made up my life. Mom, Jamarcus's voice interrupted my thoughts. I looked up to see him standing in the doorway, his backpack slung over one shoulder. Can we talk? Of course, I said, pushing the papers aside. What's on your mind? He hesitated, then walked over to the table and sat down. I could tell something was off. He'd been different lately, quieter, more withdrawn. It reminded me of the way I used to be at his age, before life forced me to grow up too fast. I don't know if I'm doing the right thing, Mom, he said, staring down at his hands. Gregory, my mentor, he's cool and all, but I don't know. It feels like he's pushing me, but not in a way I'm ready for. He talks about the future, but I don't even know where I'm going. It's like I'm just floating. I waited for him to continue, but he didn't. His words hung in the air like a question that didn't have an answer. You don't have to have everything figured out, Jamarcus, I said, my voice steady but soft. You're doing the work, you're trying, that's what matters. The future doesn't always come in a straight line. Sometimes you have to stumble a bit to figure out where you're going. He looked up at me, his expression softening. But what if I keep stumbling? You will, I said simply. But you'll get up, and you'll keep going. That's the important part. He nodded, his shoulders visibly relaxing, but I could still see the uncertainty in his eyes. I knew he didn't quite believe it, not yet, but at least he was talking to me, and that was a start. The days after that felt like a quiet breakthrough, both for me and for the kids. Tyesha was adjusting, slowly, to the idea that college wasn't going to be perfect. She still had moments of doubt, but she was learning to sit with them instead of running from them. Jamarcus, too, was making progress bit by bit. Gregory's mentorship wasn't the fix-all I had hoped for, but it was something, a first step in a direction that was better than the one he had been heading toward. As for me, I still wrestled with the idea of letting go. Letting William into our lives in this way, trusting that he wouldn't disappear when things got difficult, was not something I was used to. But I realized that I was learning too, learning to accept help, learning to trust that I wasn't alone in this anymore. And yet, even with all the help, all the promises of a brighter future, I couldn't shake the feeling that the surface had only just begun to break. Things were changing, yes, but there were deeper currents beneath it all. The question wasn't whether we would survive, because I knew we would, but whether we would thrive. And that, I knew, would take more than just outside help. It would take us together, moving through the unknown, one uncertain step at a time. The weeks passed in a blur of adjustments, subtle shifts in the way our days unfolded. Life was moving forward, but with a quiet, persistent undercurrent of change. I watched as Tyesha prepared for her first semester at college, and as Jamarcus took tentative steps forward, sometimes stumbling, sometimes finding his footing. There were days when it felt like the storm had passed, and others when the weight of the unknown seemed heavier than ever. But amid all the movement, there was a stillness in me that I couldn't ignore. It was a deep, gnawing feeling that I had only begun to scratch the surface of. The help we had received, the opportunities that were unfolding before my children, these were gifts, but they came with their own burdens. And while I was grateful, part of me was afraid that I had opened myself to something I wasn't prepared for. Afraid that I had let someone else into our lives too easily. It was one of those quiet afternoons when the doubt seemed to rise to the surface again. I sat in the kitchen, the hum of the refrigerator the only sound filling the room. The sun filtered through the curtains, casting long shadows across the table where I sat, sipping my coffee. I had a moment of peace, a rare thing these days, but it was fleeting. The doorbell rang, and my heart skipped a beat. It wasn't unusual for someone to stop by, but I always felt a pang of anxiety whenever someone came to the door unexpectedly. I set my cup down, wiped my hands on my apron, and walked toward the door. When I opened it, I wasn't prepared for what I saw. Standing there in front of me was William Carter. "William," I said, my voice a little too sharp. "What are you doing here?" He smiled, as calm and composed as ever, but there was something different in his eyes, a sincerity that wasn't there the last time we spoke. "I hope I'm not interrupting," he said, his voice steady but warm. "I wanted to check in on you and the kids. I've been thinking about how things have been going, and I wanted to make sure everything's on track." I stood there for a moment, taken aback by his sudden appearance. I had expected an email or a phone call, not an unannounced visit. But before I could say anything else, he spoke again. "I know I've helped with the big things, Tyesha's scholarship, Jamarcus's mentorship. But I also want to make sure you're okay, Deborah. I can see you're carrying a lot on your shoulders, and I don't want you to feel like you have to do it all by yourself." I was silent for a moment, the weight of his words sinking in. It felt like he could see right through me, as if he knew exactly what I was trying to hide. The truth I had been avoiding, the fear that had been creeping into the corners of my mind. "I'm managing," I said, though I knew it wasn't entirely true. "We're fine, William, really." He didn't buy it. I could tell by the way his eyes searched mine, looking for the truth I wasn't ready to admit. "Deborah, you don't have to do this alone," he said softly. "You don't have to pretend like everything's fine when it's not. It's okay to lean on people. Let me help in ways that go beyond just writing a check or making a call. I want to be part of your lives if you'll let me." His words hit me harder than I expected. I had spent so much time protecting my family, making sure my kids didn't see how hard things were, that I hadn't stopped to consider how much I was holding back from them. I hadn't let them see the real weight I was carrying, not just for them, but for myself. I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to shut the door and retreat into the familiar walls of my isolation. But another part of me, the part that had been afraid to trust anyone for so long, knew that this was an opportunity I couldn't let slip away. I opened the door wider. "Come in," I said, my voice quieter than before. "We can talk." He stepped inside, his presence filling the room in a way I hadn't expected. He looked at me with understanding, his expression soft but unwavering. We sat at the kitchen table, and I could feel the weight of the conversation ahead of us. I wasn't sure what I wanted from him, but I knew that something had to change. I couldn't keep carrying everything on my own. "Deborah," he began, his voice measured, "I know this isn't easy. I know you've been through a lot, and that's why I'm here. Not just as someone who's helped with your kids' futures, but as someone who genuinely cares about you and your family. I'm not asking for anything in return. I just want you to know that you don't have to shoulder all of this by yourself." I looked at him, my mind racing with thoughts I hadn't allowed myself to entertain before. Could I really let go? Could I really trust someone else to step in and help without the fear of being let down? I opened my mouth to speak, but the words caught in my throat. There was so much I wanted to say, so much I had kept hidden, but instead I simply nodded. "Thank you," I said, the words feeling both foreign and natural. I've never really had anyone to lean on, but maybe it's time I learned how. The days that followed felt like the start of something new, something I wasn't sure I was ready for, but knew deep down was necessary. William didn't push me. He let me take things at my own pace, offering help without expectation. It was a strange feeling, being on the receiving end of kindness, of support. It felt uncomfortable at first, like I was betraying the independence I had fought so hard to maintain. But as I watched Tyesha start to find her footing in her new life, and as I saw Jamarcus begin to open up in ways he never had before, I realized that this wasn't about weakness. This was about strength in numbers. This was about building a life where we didn't have to do everything on our own. One evening, as I was cleaning up after dinner, Jamarcus came to me, his face serious. "Mom," he said, his voice quieter than usual. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said, about not doing everything on my own. I think I get it now." I paused, wiping my hands on a dish towel. "What do you mean?" He looked up at me, a hesitant smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "I don't know. I guess I've always thought I had to handle everything myself, but maybe it's okay to let people in, to let them help. I've been pushing everyone away, and that's not going to get me anywhere." I felt my heart swell with pride. He was starting to understand, and it was more than I could have hoped for. "I'm proud of you, Jamarcus," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "You don't have to do this alone. We're in this together." He nodded, his eyes softening. "Yeah, together." And for the first time in a long time, I believed it. Things were changing, and maybe, just maybe, it was okay to let them. The air was thick with the weight of the unknown. Life, it seemed, was unfolding in ways I couldn't predict. The shifts in our family were both liberating and unsettling, like stepping into a river that was flowing too fast to navigate. But as much as I struggled with the changes, I could see that my kids were beginning to find their own way. Slowly, but surely, they were starting to believe in the possibility of a future beyond the struggles we had known. I had always thought that survival was the most important thing, that it was enough just to keep going, to make it through each day. But now, I was starting to realize that maybe survival wasn't all there was. Maybe there was more to life than simply surviving. Maybe there was a chance to live, to truly live. And yet, the doubts still lingered. Even as Tyesha began to embrace her college life with more confidence, and Jamarcus started to open up more with Gregory, I couldn't help but wonder if I was making the right choices. Letting go of the past, trusting people, was hard, harder than I had imagined. Every time I allowed myself to lean on William, I felt a twinge of guilt. Should I be doing this on my own? Shouldn't I be protecting my children from relying on someone who wasn't family? It was late one evening when I sat at the kitchen table, the hum of the refrigerator filling the silence, when William's call came in. It was unusual for him to reach out so late, and the moment I saw his name on my phone, a knot tightened in my stomach. Was something wrong? Deborah. His voice was calm but carried an edge of urgency. I need to talk to you. Can you meet me tomorrow morning? I think it's time we have a real conversation about where things are going, about what's next for you and your family. I froze. What was this about? Was I ready for this kind of conversation? I hadn't asked myself what was next. I had been so focused on getting through the day-to-day, on making sure the kids were okay, that I hadn't stopped to think about what I wanted for myself. What if this moment, this shift in our lives, was the beginning of something I wasn't prepared for? What if everything I had worked for, everything I had sacrificed, was about to change again in ways I couldn't control? I'll be there, I said quietly, trying to keep the tremor out of my voice. Morning's fine. The next morning, I woke early, the heaviness from the conversation lingering in the pit of my stomach. I had spent the night replaying my thoughts, wondering what William wanted to discuss, what kind of decisions we were about to make that could alter everything. It was unsettling to know that, for the first time in a long time, the future wasn't just in my hands anymore. It was in the hands of others, people I barely knew, but who had already changed our lives in ways I hadn't expected. When I arrived at the cafe where we were meeting, I found William sitting at a table near the window, looking out at the street, his face unreadable. I approached slowly, feeling like I was walking into an unfamiliar room, unsure of the conversation that awaited me. Deborah, he greeted me with a small smile, standing up as I approached. Thank you for coming. I know this isn't easy. I sat down across from him, trying to keep my hands from trembling. What's this about, William? What's going on? He took a deep breath, clearly choosing his words carefully. It's about the future, Deborah, your future, your children's future. I think it's time to take a step back and really think about what comes next for all of you. I nodded, unsure of where he was going with this. We've been talking about the scholarship, about Jamarcus's mentorship. I thought we were all on the right path. We are, he said gently. But there's more at stake here. You've been working hard to give your kids a future, Deborah, but what about your own future? What do you want for yourself? His question hung in the air between us like a weight I hadn't realized was there. I stared at him, trying to process what he was asking. What did I want? After everything, after all the years of sacrifice, of putting my children first, I had never once stopped to consider what I needed, what I wanted. I don't know, I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. I've never really thought about it. I've always just focused on them, keeping them safe, making sure they have what they need. Deborah, that's the problem, William said, leaning forward. You've been carrying all of this on your own for so long. You've been so focused on surviving that you haven't allowed yourself the space to think about thriving. It's time to start asking yourself what you need, what you want. Not just for your kids, but for you. I stared at him, feeling both shaken and awakened by his words. How had I missed this? How had I allowed myself to get so caught up in the struggle to survive that I had forgotten that I deserved a life too? I don't know how to do that, I said softly, almost to myself. I don't know how to stop putting everyone else first. You don't have to stop putting them first, Deborah, William said, his voice low and steady. But you can't keep putting yourself last. You have to find a balance. You have to give yourself permission to live, not just exist. I looked down at my hands, trying to steady the whirlwind of emotions swirling in my chest. I had been so focused on my kids' future that I had forgotten to consider mine. But how could I? I had spent my entire adult life serving others, sacrificing what I wanted, what I needed for them. It was what a mother did, wasn't it? But maybe there was more to it than that. Maybe I had given so much of myself that I had forgotten what it felt like to want something for me. You're right, I said quietly. I don't know how to balance that. William smiled, his gaze softening. We'll figure it out together. You don't have to have it all figured out right now, Deborah. But you deserve to think about your future, too. You've given so much. Now it's time to let others give to you, and maybe, just maybe, it's time to let yourself dream. I stared at him, a mix of gratitude and uncertainty welling up inside me. The future had always felt like something I had to control, something I had to make happen on my own. But now, sitting here with William, I realized something important. Maybe it was time to let go of the fear, to stop pretending I could do it all alone. Maybe it was time to accept that the future could be a shared journey, not one I had to walk alone. "Thank you," I whispered, my voice trembling with the enormity of what I was beginning to understand. "Thank you for making me see that. You don't need to thank me, Deborah. You've always had that strength inside you," William said, his voice filled with warmth. "I'm just here to help you see it." As I left the cafe that morning, the weight on my shoulders felt a little lighter. For the first time in a long time, I felt the flicker of something I hadn't allowed myself to feel. Hope. Hope for my kids' futures, yes, but also hope for my own. The journey ahead was uncertain, and there would still be hard days, but I finally understood that maybe, just maybe, I didn't have to carry it all alone. And that realization, that simple truth, felt like the first step into a new chapter of my life. One that wasn't just about surviving, but about living. The weeks that followed our conversation at the cafe felt like a turning point, a quiet but undeniable shift in the way I approached life. It was as though I had stepped onto a new path, one I hadn't seen before, and while I still didn't know exactly where it would lead, there was a certain peace in knowing I didn't have to figure it out on my own. William's words stayed with me. "You don't have to have it all figured out right now." I repeated them to myself on the hard days, the ones when the weight of old habits pulled me back, when the instinct to put my kids' needs ahead of my own screamed louder than my desire to step forward for myself. But something was different. A small, quiet strength had started to grow inside me. I was learning to give myself the space to breathe, to think about my own needs. I was still a mother, still fiercely protective of Tyesha and Jamarcus, but I was starting to realize that I, too, was worthy of a life beyond the roles I had played for so long. It wasn't easy. Change never is. Tyesha's first semester at college was beginning to feel like a test in its own right. She had come home for the weekend, her eyes still bright, but now with the weariness of someone who was trying to juggle it all. I could see the struggle in her every movement, the way she hesitated before speaking, as though she were afraid to admit how much it was costing her. Physically, emotionally. She sat across from me at the kitchen table that Sunday morning, a cup of coffee between us. Her eyes were tired, but there was something else in them too, a sense of wanting, of needing to feel like she was making it, even if she wasn't sure how. "How's it going?" I asked, breaking the silence between us. She looked at me, and for the first time in weeks, I saw the full weight of everything she was carrying. "It's tough, Mom. I thought it'd be different. Everyone makes college seem so perfect. But it's hard. I don't know if I'm cut out for it, and every time I feel like I'm catching up, something else hits." I could hear the crack in her voice, and my heart ached for her. She had always been the one to take on everything, to put the world on her shoulders. Now that she was facing the real weight of that, I realized just how heavy it was. "Sweetie, you don't have to do it all at once," I said softly. "It's okay to take breaks, to slow down. You're doing the best you can, and that's enough." Tyesha smiled faintly, but I could tell she didn't fully believe it. "I don't want to disappoint you," she whispered. "I want to be everything you've always hoped for me." And there it was, the pressure she had been carrying all along. The weight of my expectations, of her own dreams, pressing down on her like a constant burden. I wanted to tell her that she didn't have to be perfect, that I didn't expect her to be. But somehow, the words never felt like enough. "You don't have to be perfect, Tyesha," I said, my voice firm. I don't want you to carry that for me. You're enough just as you are. You don't owe me anything. You owe it to yourself to be who you are, not who you think I want you to be. She met my gaze, her eyes searching mine for something, maybe for permission, maybe for reassurance. And in that moment, I realized that I hadn't been letting her see the full truth of my own journey. I had been so focused on her dreams, her future, that I hadn't let her see my own struggles, my own growth. I know you're scared, I continued, my voice softening. But I'm scared too, every day. The difference is that you've made it this far, you're already stronger than you know, and it's okay to not have all the answers. You don't have to carry it all by yourself, just like I don't have to carry everything alone either. She took a long breath, her shoulders relaxing a little, though the tension was still there. I just want to make you proud. You already do, I said, my voice thick with emotion. You already make me proud. We sat in silence for a few moments, the weight of everything between us, but in that quiet, I realized something. My daughter was still figuring out who she was, just like I was. And as much as I wanted to shield her from the weight of the world, I had to let her find her own way, just as I was learning to find mine. Jamarcus, on the other hand, had started to make progress, albeit in his own quiet way. Gregory, his mentor, had been pushing him hard, perhaps harder than I would have liked, but it seemed to be making a difference. The boy I had raised, the one who struggled to express himself, was slowly becoming someone I recognized again. It was small, these changes, an extra conversation at dinner, a willingness to try something new, an openness I hadn't seen in months, but they were there. Still, I couldn't help but wonder if I was pushing him too hard. Was I putting too much on his shoulders? Was he really ready to take on what he was being asked to do? I wasn't sure. One afternoon, I decided to sit down with him, away from all the noise and expectations, and just ask how he was really doing. Jamarcus, I began, my voice careful. I know you've been meeting with Gregory a lot. How are you feeling about everything, really? He looked at me, his face hard to read, but after a long pause, he shrugged. I don't know, Mom, it's different. Gregory pushes me, but I think he's trying to get me to see something. I don't know what it is yet, but I think it's helping. I studied him, trying to gauge what was going on behind his words. Do you feel like you're getting what you need from him? He hesitated. I don't know, Mom. I'm trying, but sometimes I don't feel like I belong in all this. I'm just trying to figure out where I fit in. I reached out and touched his hand, the same way I had with Taesha. You belong exactly where you are. You don't have to figure it all out right now. You just have to keep moving forward, even when it feels hard. And you don't have to do it alone, not anymore. He didn't say anything, but he didn't pull his hand away either. I took that as a small victory. The day after that conversation with Jamarcus, I received an unexpected call. It was from William again. I know you've been busy, Deborah, he said, his voice warm but steady. But I wanted to let you know that there's an opportunity I think would be great for you. An opportunity? I asked, unsure of where he was going with this. Yes, he replied. There's a local nonprofit organization that helps single parents with career development and financial planning. They're offering a program that I think could really help you, give you the tools to move forward in a way that gives you the space to think about what you want for yourself. I sat in stunned silence for a moment. I hadn't considered any kind of program for myself, but the thought of it, the possibility of finding something that was just for me, was both exciting and terrifying. Would you be interested? William asked, breaking through my thoughts. I swallowed hard. Yes, I said, my voice trembling slightly. Yes, I think I would be. I could hear the smile in his voice. I'll get the details to you, Deborah. You don't have to decide right away. But I think it's the right time for you to start focusing on your future, too. And just like that, the door had opened again. A door that had always been there, but that I had never allowed myself to see. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't just thinking about surviving, I was thinking about living, about what might come next. And maybe, just maybe, I was starting to believe that the future I had always dreamed of was possible. For me, too. The weeks that followed William's call felt like stepping into a new world. Everything was different, yet nothing had changed. The house still creaked with the weight of memories, the hum of daily life still punctuated by the rhythm of chores, work, and school. But I was beginning to see it all through a new lens, one that I hadn't allowed myself to look through before. The door that William had opened for me, one I had been too afraid to walk through, was now ajar, inviting me to step beyond what I knew. Tyesha's college life was settling into a pattern, though I could tell she still struggled with the pressure. She called often, talking more about the people she met than about her classes. She was making friends, building relationships, but there was always a sense of exhaustion in her voice, as if she was giving more than she could afford. Jamarcus, too, was shifting in ways I couldn't always understand. He was still reticent, still resistant, but there were moments now when he seemed more open. The way he approached me after his sessions with Gregory, the slight shifts in his body language when he shared a small success, it was as though the layers of anger and self-doubt were beginning to peel away, bit by bit. But it wasn't just them. It was me. I was changing too. The non-profit program that William had connected me with had begun. It was a series of workshops that focused on career development, financial literacy, and most importantly, self-empowerment. I remember walking into the first session, feeling like an outsider, unsure if I really belonged there, if I had the right to take up space in a room full of people who seemed so much more put together than I was. The facilitator, a woman named Angela, was warm, approachable, and unapologetically confident in a way that made me want to shrink into myself. But Angela didn't let me. "Everyone here has a story," she had said that first day, her voice firm but comforting. "But your story doesn't have to define you. It can't. You get to choose who you are every day, and the first step is understanding that you have value. You've always had value, Deborah. Now it's time to see it." I hadn't realized it at the time, but that single statement was the spark I needed. That was the moment when I realized I had spent so long being everything for everyone else that I had forgotten to be me. I had forgotten what it meant to have value outside of the roles I played: mother, teacher, caregiver. And now, with the support of this group, I was beginning to uncover what I had buried deep inside for so many years. One evening, about a month after I'd started the program, I was sitting at the kitchen table, my mind still buzzing from the latest workshop. Tyesha was in her room studying, and Jamarcus was at the kitchen counter, working on something for his mentorship program. He didn't seem as withdrawn as before, but he wasn't fully present either. It was that quiet space between trying and giving up where everything felt both possible and impossible at the same time. I set my notebook down and turned to him. "How's it going with Gregory?" He shrugged but didn't look up from his phone. "It's okay. He's trying to get me to think about what I want, but I'm not sure what that is yet." I nodded. "It's okay if you don't know, Jamarcus. Sometimes figuring it out takes time. The important thing is that you're asking yourself the question." He shot me a quick glance, then gave a reluctant half-smile. "Yeah, I guess. I'm proud of you," I said, my voice firm, but I could see the resistance in his eyes. "For sticking with it. You don't have to have it all figured out right now." His smile faded slightly, and he put his phone down. "I know, but I'm still not sure where I'm supposed to be. I'm trying to make sense of it all, but I don't know." I could hear the frustration in his voice, and it broke my heart. He was so much like me at his age, carrying the weight of expectations, unsure of where he fit into the world. "You don't have to know yet," I repeated, standing up to walk over to him. "Sometimes just taking the next step is enough." He didn't respond immediately, but I saw something in his eyes, an acknowledgement that maybe, just maybe, there was more to his journey than he had believed. Later that week, as I was walking home from one of the program sessions, I found myself feeling a little lighter than usual. The air was crisp, the sun setting behind me, casting a warm glow over everything. I felt different, like something inside me had shifted in ways I didn't yet fully understand. I had spent so much of my life walking through this world with my eyes down, my shoulders hunched, just trying to get through each day. Now, for the first time, I was walking with my head up, my heart open, unsure of what was ahead, but ready for it. As I approached the house, I noticed William's car parked outside. I wasn't expecting him, but something about the timing felt right. I walked up the steps and knocked on the door, and when I opened it, he was standing there, his usual calm demeanor replaced with something more, something purposeful. "Deborah," he said, his voice warm, "I've been thinking a lot about our last conversation, and I wanted to share something with you. It's about the next steps, not just for your kids, but for you." I felt a flutter in my chest, but I held my ground. "What do you mean?" He stepped forward, his expression more serious than I had seen it before. "I think it's time you started considering some new opportunities. You've been focused on your children's futures, and rightly so, but now it's time to think about yours. There's a position opening up at the nonprofit I'm involved with. It's not much, but it's a start. I think you'd be perfect for it." My heart raced, the offer hanging in the air like a promise. I hadn't expected this, but now that it was before me, it felt like a crossroads. Could I really take that step? Could I start thinking about my own future in a way that wasn't entirely about survival? "I don't know," I said, my voice betraying a mix of excitement and fear. "I haven't done anything for myself in so long. I'm not sure I can." William smiled, that same quiet confidence returning to his eyes. "You can. Deborah, I know you can. You've been carrying this family for so long. It's time to let yourself be carried for a little while. It's time for you to live, not just survive." I stood there, the weight of his words settling over me like a blanket. For the first time, I saw the path ahead, not just for my kids, but for me too. "I'll think about it," I said, my voice steady now. "But I think I'm ready to take that step." William's smile widened. "I'm not going anywhere, Deborah. You'll take it when you're ready." As I closed the door behind him and leaned against it, a strange sense of calm washed over me. This wasn't just about my kids anymore. It was about me too, and that was something I had never allowed myself to truly believe before. The journey ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time, I didn't feel so alone. I wasn't just walking through the world anymore. I was ready to step into it, with both feet. The days after William's offer passed in a whirlwind of thoughts, dreams, and realizations. I found myself caught between the pull of the familiar and the unknown. My heart, for the first time in years, beat with something other than worry. It beat with hope. The kind of hope I had long buried beneath layers of fear and self-doubt. And as much as I had told myself I was ready for this, for the opportunity to take the next step in my own life, I still felt that familiar weight on my shoulders, the one that told me I wasn't allowed to take up space for myself, that I had to keep everything together for everyone else. But I was learning. Slowly, surely, I was learning that taking care of myself wasn't selfish, that I wasn't betraying my children or my role as a mother by allowing myself to have dreams, too. The first time I stepped into the office for the nonprofit job, it felt surreal. The building was small, tucked away on a quiet street, but there was something about it that felt like a place of possibility. There were people there, working hard, helping others, and for the first time, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. There was no rush, no urgency to make everything perfect. There was just a chance to start again, to learn, to grow. Angela, the woman who had first welcomed me into the program, was there, of course. She had a way about her that made me feel like I could accomplish anything, even on days when I felt unsure. As I sat down at my new desk, my hands trembling slightly, she walked over and gave me an encouraging smile. "You'll get the hang of it," she said, placing a folder in front of me. "We all start somewhere, And the fact that you're here today means you're already on the right path. It wasn't glamorous work, not at first, but it was meaningful. It was a reminder that I had something to offer beyond the roles I had always played. I wasn't just a mother or a teacher. I was Deborah, a woman with her own strengths, her own potential. It felt good to finally recognize that. As the days went by, the routine became more familiar. The work was hard but fulfilling. It wasn't about climbing some corporate ladder or proving something to the world. It was about doing something that mattered. And for once, I felt like I was making a difference, not just for my family, but for myself. At home, things were shifting as well. Tyesha had grown more comfortable in her college life, her voice lighter when she called. There was still the occasional doubt, but there was also excitement in her words now, as she began to carve out her own space in the world. Jamarcus had continued meeting with Gregory, and although there were still days when he pulled back, there were also days when I could see a clearer vision in his eyes. He was starting to find his way, too, his own path, not the one anyone else had set for him. The weight that had once hung so heavily over me, over all of us, was starting to feel like it was lifting. Not in big leaps, but in quiet, steady moments. Every day was a new step toward something better, and it was more than I had ever dared to hope for. One evening, as I sat with Tyesha and Jamarcus in the living room, we were talking about our day. It was a simple conversation, but one that felt different. There was no tension, no unspoken fear, just three people finding their way in the world. "I'm glad you're here," Tyesha said suddenly, looking up from her phone. "You know, back at school, I've been realizing how much I depend on you, Mom. You always know how to make things feel okay, even when I don't." I smiled at her, feeling something warm spread through me. "I think you're the one who makes it okay, Tyesha. I just help remind you of that." Jamarcus nodded in agreement. "Yeah, Mom, you've been doing that for us for a long time, but I think we've got your back now, too." I was silent for a moment, overwhelmed by the simple truth of it. I had always believed that my children needed me to be strong for them, that my role was to protect them at all costs. But the truth was, we were in this together, and that was more than I had ever realized. The world was still uncertain, but for the first time, I wasn't walking through it alone. And neither were they. I woke up the next morning with a quiet sense of peace that I hadn't felt in years. The house was still messy, the bills still piled up on the counter, but there was a new kind of freedom in the air. A freedom that came from knowing we were moving forward, step by step, no longer weighed down by the ghosts of the past. I was learning to give myself the space to live, not just survive, and I was seeing my children do the same. They were finding their own paths, carving out futures they could be proud of, not because they had to, but because they wanted to. I realized then that life would never be perfect. It would never be free of challenges or setbacks, but it could be full of love, hope, and the strength to keep going, even when the path ahead seemed unclear. To everyone who's read this, I want to say thank you. Thank you for sharing in this journey with me. We all face struggles, some of us quietly, some of us loudly. But in the end, it's the people we surround ourselves with, the love we give and receive, that truly matters. I wish you all the strength to keep going, the courage to embrace your own journey, and the wisdom to know that you're never alone. Take care of yourselves, and take care of the ones you love. Wishing you all health, happiness, and the peace that comes with knowing you're enough, just as you are.